cost. The FDA approved Leqembi for patients with mild dementia. It's been shown to modestly slow the cognitive decline caused by Alzheimer's. Have you been on Threads yet? The AP's Jennifer King says there's a squabble.
Twitter is threatening to sue Meta, the parent company of Facebook.
Pastor Brooks is on.
Okay, let me say hello to him.
Hiring former Twitter employees
Pastor
to
Brooks.
create a copycat app.
Good morning.
How are you?
On the Threads engineering.
I am great. How are you this morning?
Great.
The Netherlands can order Schiphol Airport, one of Europe's busiest, to reduce the number of
Hold on
flights
one
per
moment,
year,
please.
says an appeals court. The judges say local residents have complained for years about noise pollution from the airport. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen visiting China said this morning Washington and Beijing have a duty to cooperate on issues that affect the world. She appealed for regular channels of communication. This is AP News. Ukraine's President Zelensky has been asking for more military aid. Now,
the European Union is making strides to increase
How's it going, hon?
to Ukraine. The EU's taken a
Darius?
major step in improving plans to
I'm
How's
here.
it going?
of ammunition and missiles within
It's going to working hard, making this thing happen.
Okay, yeah, I love that. Make sure. Let me know what's going on. You know, I need to speak with you about the Saturday morning forum. There's some things I just want to go on and do.
Facebook sounds good.
Thank you. There's some things that I want us to just go on and do.
The deal follows up the March decision by EU leaders.
Let's definitely knock it on down.
I'm
Yeah,
Charles.
let's do that.
lots of red on Wall Street yesterday. The Dow dropped 366
Let's talk about
points
that.
yesterday. The S&P lost 35 points. The Nasdaq gave up 112 points. I'm Rita Foley, AP News.
This is 8:20 a.m. WCPT Willow Springs and streaming worldwide at WCPT820.com.
I want to talk with you about that. Plus, I also want to involve Maurice.
Now, your WCPT
You know,
820
and make this
weather
as
update.
broad as it can be.
From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Kaczynski.
Yeah.
Skies will become mostly sunny here for today, a high around 80 degrees. Winds out of the northwest around 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then for tonight, a chance for showers and thunderstorms, cloudy, a low near 63. Saturday, a chance for showers and thunderstorms, cloudy, high of 73 degrees. And
But I
by
want to talk
Sunday,
with you
mostly
about
sunny,
that.
high of 81. Monday, Sunday, 86. That's your latest
Reverend, I
Chicago
don't
weather
want to
update.
wait for him.
Currently, it's 67.
This is Ron Whittingham, and I'm co-owner of Megan Financial, an
Waiting for
independent
him
retirement
is,
and
you know,
financial
I just
services
don't
firm
think it's.
here in Chicago.
He wants to be
We
involved in
built our
everything, but
business on
he
playing
can't
the
be
long
involved in everything.
Teaching financial literacy to
Nobody
our clients,
can.
to prepare them for a great future and a dignified
And sometimes
retirement.
what you need to do, one of the
Investments,
things I
pensions,
learned from my
401ks, we're all pretty complicated.
working with him with
We make
the
sure
radio
that you
show, I
understand
just, well,
Give us
you
a
know, and
call,
that was also
708-444-1090.
trust. I had to just begin to
We're Megan
present
Financial,
things to
and
him
we're
just
your
and go
partners in a
on.
happy retirement. Or visit us
Yeah.
at MEDENT.com.
You know, and just say, look, this is what we're doing.
Services offered through Santita Advisors LLC, member of FINRA SIPC,
And that's
registered
that.
investment advisor. Santita is under separate ownership from any other named entity. The views depicted in this product are general in nature and provided for informational use only. These are not necessarily those of Santita Advisors LLC. They should not be considered a specific investment advice. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy. Keep in mind that investing involves risk, including loss of principal. Investment decisions should be based upon an individual's own goal, time horizon, and tolerance for risk. Consult your investment and/or tax professional regarding your unique situation.
Because, well, you know, let's talk after
if you're
this.
a Republican,
If, you know, once
and
you're done
hate
with,
when I talk
when you
about
get a break in,
right-wing
your
extremists and white
in the earlier part
supremacists
of your
and
day.
Christian nationalists,
Okay.
that's not all of us.
I'll reach out to you.
Party that is emboldening
Please do. I've got to be
anti-Semitism,
over at the office at
hatred
10.
towards the LGBTQ plus community, people of color, to eliminate the history.
On
And the
something
reason I
else.
talk about the
But we
Republicans
can
and
talk
the
about
white
that,
Christian
too.
nationalists and cozying up with white
Because
supremacists
really,
and
they
being
tried to turn
dangerous
it into a
because
round
what they
table.
did on January 6th
You know, 'cause these-
is a
'cause they
complete
do that.
disregard for
That's where
our
you just sit around and you
institutions.
talk.
And there is no reason for me to
No,
So I'm
expect
in the conference.
if they are
No,
successful in
The
2024,
Saturday morning
that it is
forum.
not going to get worse. I believe it's
No
going to get
production,
worse
none of that.
if we do not fight back
I
against
said, that is
hatred.
not why.
We are
That
in a
is not
dangerous
what.
place.
No.
You're listening to WCPT.
That is not what made us who we are.
This is WCPT
So,
820, where
We
facts
just have to go
matter.
on.
See that cute little dog?
How much
in the
time
next
do we
room there?
have?
Chances are it's
3 minutes.
Okay, thanks so
a
much.
breeding facility that forces caged,
So-
neglected, and often sick dogs to churn out puppy after puppy to be sold for profit. Meanwhile, millions of wonderful, healthy pets end up in animal shelters. This leads to the killing of more than 9,000 by the end of today. But with one simple choice, you can help. Just
You
by
know what you need
deciding
to start
adopt instead
pass.
of
Make sure you
purchase your
pass
next
out,
pet.
Darius.
Animal shelters are full of amazing pets looking for a
Wipes,
home.
wet
When you
wipes,
adopt
and
your
soap
new best
and
friend,
deodorant.
not only are you saving a life, you're taking a
Hygiene
stand
poverty is
against
a real
puppy mills.
issue.
When
Some
your
of our
friends
children
see
are
the
afraid to
smart
raise
choice
their
and
arms in
impact you've
school
made, then
because they
adopt
don't have
their next
deodorant.
pet and share with 5 of their friends. You share with 5 more. Before long,
Yeah,
thousands get involved. Pet stores stop
it's a
selling dogs for
real
puppies,
issue.
and
Yeah.
even more lives are saved. And with your
In
help,
fact, that's
we
what
can
that's one of
save
the
them
things I
all.
want to
Visit
really grab a hold of
bestfriends.org/puppymills
as
to
an
learn
issue.
more.
You know, and it's not just feminine products.
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan.
It
in
impacts
2003.
everybody. A lot of people don't have hot running water at home.
They said, "I regret to inform you that
You know?
your husband
Or cold running water. A lot of folks
Victor
just don't
sustained
have
a
those
moderate
things.
traumatic brain injury. I was doing school
And,
full time,
um,
and I was also caring
it's-
for Victor.
It's,
One of the
it's-
most
it's a real
important
issue.
elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself. I just
It's a
didn't
real
want to
issue.
forget that I also had goals and that I also
And you
had
need
a
to talk
life.
about it.
What I did is I challenged Victor to meet me halfway. There are almost 6 million military and veteran caregivers across the nation. We have our own journey, and we can fulfill that journey at the same time that we are helping our loved one.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for a free military veterans guide to navigate your caregiving journey and better care for your loved one and yourself. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
How much
We
time?
don't want you on our team.
We have 1 minute.
Thank you, hon.
This is weight bias.
I'm worried about your weight.
Don't you care what other people think?
Millions who live and are affected by obesity face weight bias every day.
You're not the right fit for this job.
Unfair judgment by others.
Just stop eating so much and exercise some. You lose all this weight.
These people often blame themselves.
It's just me. Nobody likes me.
I do exercise and eat right. And I talk to
30 seconds.
Okay, thank
weight
you.
bias hurts.
Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect.
Your words and actions matter.
Let's stop weight bias.
Let's work together.
Be part of the solution. Go to stopweightbias.com and learn more.
10 seconds.
This message from
Perfect.
Obesity
Thank
Action
you.
Coalition.
Stand by.
WCPT 820, where facts matter.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am green.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It is Friday, July 7th, 2023. Getting a little bit of feedback here. We're going to work that out. Hey, thank you, Alex. Let's have a great show today, everybody. Let's talk about the Supreme Court. Should they have term limits? That is a bill that is being put before the Congress. Should they have term limits? I mean, what do you think? 10 years, 20 years, 5? What? Or do you think they should continue to go on as they have gone on? We have seen what this lifetime appointment, this unchecked power, they don't even really check themselves on the Supreme Court. We see what it's doing. You have billionaires who end up essentially paying off justices so they can vote favorably in their cases. Essentially, that's what it's come down to with so many of these justices. And we see it's a real insider's game. So as we're looking at reforms, as we're looking at really making our democracy come alive, keeping the republic, securing it, and making it more democratic. What about limiting the terms of Supreme Court justices? What about the alumni? Now that we've seen affirmative action gutted, race considered admissions, well, that is out the window. And how will that go from colleges to contracts and on and on? It's going to be a big deal. Well, guess what? There's something else that's going on. Now there's a lawsuit that has been filed that is going to be talking about, hey, what about legacy admissions? About 3 to 6% of those who are admitted to Harvard as first-time applicants, if your parents were not in that club, well, they get admitted. But 33% of legacies get admitted, no matter what. You see, if your parents contribute a lot of money, you can get in. In fact, when I got in, they told me I got in spite of my father. That was political. It's interesting. I'm glad I had that experience so I could share it with you because I learned so much in it. So I want to know from you, what about this legacy, the legacy clauses, particularly in the Ivy League? They say it absolutely favors children of alumni, and they say that it really protects white children. It gives white kids an open pathway to admission to these elite institutions. Now, mind you, and it's interesting, the black students who go to the Ivy Leagues graduate at a higher rate than the white students. Those people who are accepted under affirmative action. So it's a lot. And we're going to be talking about hygiene poverty. Did you know don't assume that everybody has running water or access to it. Don't assume that everybody has deodorant, soap, etc. Some of our children are in school and they are afraid to raise their hands, Pastor Darius Brooks, because they don't have deodorant.
Wow.
And they don't want to be teased by their peers because of the odor that not having deodorant carries. Think about that. Think about that. Think about that. Think about that. I mean, maybe we should open our schools earlier for our kids who have this trouble so they can go to the gym and shower and have soap and have breakfast. I mean, there's some basic needs, basic human needs that people need to have taken care of. And so we're going to be talking about hygiene poverty with Dr. Shanina Knighton. So let's get right to it, everybody. We've got a lot to talk about today, July 15th through the 19th, the Rainbow Push International Conference. I hope you will be there. No one will be turned away. It's going to be at Rainbow Push at 50th and Drexel and on the campus of the University of Chicago, which is where Reverend Jackson, that's how he came to Chicago. He came to Chicago on a full scholarship to get a master's in divinity at the U of C. And so we're kind of back there now. That's where everything began for him at the University of Chicago. So you want to be there July 15th through the 19th. And in between that, I'm going to have a birthday, so I want y'all to be there. It's going to be great. Everybody, let's talk. Let's talk. Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. I want you to talk to me about what the big story of the week is in your mind. Tell me about hygiene poverty. Talk to me about term limits for the Supreme Court. Talk to me about legacy admissions. No one's talking about that. No one has filed a lawsuit on that until recently. No one talked about, wow. I mean, your chance of getting into the Ivies is increased 5 or 10-fold if your mother or father went there. Think about it. So, hey, everybody, call me at 773-763-9278. The gunman who killed 23 people and wounded 22 others at a Texas Walmart is expected to be sentenced today. For the past 2 days, survivors and relatives of victims of the August 2019 shooting in El Paso faced the man who carried out one of the deadliest attacks targeting Latinos in modern U.S. history to deliver their impact statements. A 24-year-old gunman nodded yes Thursday when asked by the son of the victim if he was sorry for the massacre, but displayed no emotion. The FDA has granted full approval to the first Alzheimer's drug proven to slow the course of the memory-robbing disease. The drug known as Leqembi received accelerated approval in January based on evidence that it clears plaque buildups in the brain that are associated with Alzheimer's disease. A growing number of GOP presidential candidates are hitting the campaign trail months before the first nominating contest to boost their fundraising efforts. Former President Donald Trump's campaign has raised $55 million in the second quarter of 2023. A Trump campaign official told CNN that figure nearly doubles the 18.8 million he raised in the first quarter of this year as his team continued to aggressively fundraise off the former president's legal troubles. No one is even close. Meanwhile, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' campaign raised $20 million during the second fundraising quarter. It was announced yesterday. And hey, everybody, it's going to be a beautiful day in Chicago in the 70s. I'm glad to know that's not going to be too hot, not going to be too cool. 70 in the mid 70s, partly cloudy in Minneapolis, St. Paul, 79 degrees, mostly cloudy. In Major League Baseball, the Orioles will be facing off against the Twins. The Brewers 6, the Cubs 5, the Blue Jays 5, and the White Sox 4. In the WNBA, and get out and support these ladies. We got to pop up the attendance, everybody. The Dream will be facing the Sky tonight, and they'll be facing, and on Sunday, it's going to be great. Mercury will be facing the Lynx, and the Lynx will be facing the Aces on Sunday. In soccer, Chicago will be playing Nashville, and Minnesota will be playing Austin. It's a great, great time to be out in the sporting world. Pastor Darius Brooks, what is the good news today? First of all, how can we, you have been getting food to people, and I was just talking with you just before we came on the air. We got to figure out a way to get wet wipes and deodorant and soap to people as well, because folks are really struggling. If you live in a car, if you live in a house that doesn't have running water, that is a very real thing. But how can we just get in the line? Where's your church? When can we worship? Just very quickly before you go into the good news.
Good morning, Santita. Great Central Church, 10216 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois. That's right off of 290 in Manheim. Right by Hillside, Maywood, Bellwood. Y'all, it's on the west side of Chicago. Great Central Church, 10216 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois. Santita, we've been giving out over 100,000 masks, KN95 masks, and we just got in some disinfectant wipes. I have to see if they're able, over 100,000. I have to see if they're able to be used. I know wet wipes are different than sanitizing wipes. So I got to see what's the difference, just for information's sake. But we have those as well to just give out thousands, 100,000 of them at the church. So 10216 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois, every Tuesday from 5 to 7 for 8 different townships. And those who come, as you said earlier, we won't be turning nobody away. And on Wednesday, seniors, if you're afraid to come out, we have it from noon till 2 for seniors to come to Great Central and get food every week. Every week, please share with somebody every week. You do not have to be without food. Santita, I'm excited about the word being a lamp into our feet and a light into our pathway. Santita, if you are a radio personality, you have to go to where the radio is and the wattage to be able to talk to the people. If you are a doctor, you have to go to a hospital or where they have the instruments you need to work on people. If you are a policeman, you must have a gun to go to a police department to make sure what you're doing is advantageous to you producing what you need to produce. Santita, Matthew 7 and 6 says, give not that which is holy unto the dogs, neither cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn again and rend or tear apart you. You probably want to say, Pastor, how are you correlating this scripture with what this topic is going to be today? Santita, if I had to use for a topic today, a whole lot of nothing. A whole lot of nothing. A whole lot of nothing. Santita, if we are believers, our new self longs to be caught. We aren't comfortable being in the place that we're in there. We are a new creation, remember? So we're not to produce a whole lot of nothing, because the word says, therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come. God's word helps us live in the light of his promises, but he requires us to be accountable. For real, in our everyday life, in our everyday decisions, in our everyday choices. He never asked us to do everything right, but to be accountable and responsible.
Dr. Knighton's on.
To make sure we do what we say we want to do. And second, to him, his word, and to acknowledge him always. Santita, we should not let how he has forgiven us by not trusting him totally be a loss. And we should never forsake the truth. Never, ever, ever forsake the truth if we're going to be free. I got to close this, Santita. When you don't seek operation before doing something, this is not being accountable, and it makes one ineffective. And then, Santita, I learned something this week that I shared it with Great Central that knocked me off my feet. Sacrifice is to risk everything with no guarantee. Santita. Damn it. A sacrifice is to risk everything with no guarantee and context of what one believes outside of where they are. So there's a sacrifice that if I help somebody, they're going to be helped. If there's a sacrifice that I don't want to give what's sacred to the dogs and to my pearls to the swine, if there's a sacrifice to Santita to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's a risk. It's to risk everything with no guarantee. I don't know how to, but I'm going to get up and I'm going to make it happen anyway, because Santita, on the other side of the sacrifice is a win-win. And on the other side of the sacrifice in Christ, it's sweet. And here we can never again gain what's designed for us to lose. Here we won't produce a whole lot of nothing. But doing all things through Christ that strengthens us, he says, don't give what's sacred to the dogs, and don't feed your pearls to swine. Don't just go through life hoping, because in God's word, Santita, hoping translates to strategy. You don't hope without a strategy. And when you hope in Christ, there is a strategy that you do not produce a whole lot of nothing.
Amen. 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 The address of Grace Central, give it to us. Give it to us. We love the joy that you bring to all of this. How can we get to Grace Central?
10216 South Kissimmee Street, Westchester, Illinois. Every Sunday from 10:30 to noon, we get information. People tell us I'm successful, but they don't give us the details. That's just Christ. Go and just believe. Live your best life, Santita. They don't give us the details. Yep. God bless you all so much.
I love it, and we love you, Pastor Darius Brooks. We love you, and thank you for being with us. Have a great weekend. Can't wait to be with you next week at the Rainbow Push International Conference. Everybody, we have got Dr. Shanina Knight. Why don't you stay with me, Doctor? It's Pastor Brooks, because we've been talking about hygiene poverty the past couple of days, and I was sharing Dr. Knighton as Pastor Brooks and First Lady Deborah Brooks and the Grace Central family give away hundreds of bags of food, of groceries, complete groceries to people. I said, would you consider some wet wipes and deodorant and soap? Because a lot of our people don't have that. We can't assume that people have running water. I was reading a story about the Alney family in Philadelphia, Dr. Knighton. And in the story, what was so painful was that there were some children who were afraid to raise their hands in class because they don't have deodorant. And they did not want to be teased by their peers because of the odor. I mean, hygiene poverty is growing all across the globe. I mean, wow. I mean, these are things that you don't think about if you just take for granted that when you get up, you're going to be able to turn on your water and bathe. We can't do that, Dr. Knighton.
Exactly. And I know that into it yesterday as well, just when talking about just different aspects of it. And so we talked about menstrual poverty yesterday, but we'll talk about just even, having the access to soap, and detergent. And so I brought up the fact that young girls may not have the proper materials that they need, and they may miss school. However, there are children that also miss school because their uniforms aren't clean. To your point, they might miss school because they didn't get a chance to bathe. There are some households that, because water is not a highly prevalent resource, where they don't bathe every day, they may bathe every other day. Linen, which is again something that's emphasized because they're coming from outside. You also have the factor that when we are lying in our own bed, and we sleep, that is when our body undergoes the most expensive cell repair, rejuvenation, growth. That's when a lot of stuff happens. And so people shed old skin cells. And so you have dead skin cells in your bed, and you also have germs from outside. So that's why people tell you to make sure that you are changing out your linen. Mm-hmm. However, for some of these households that may not have detergent, they may not necessarily have adequate appliances in order for them to be able to launder their materials, they're constantly having to deal with issues such as, let's say, infections. And I'll just give you an example of like, okay, well, how is that related? Imagine a child that's sleeping on a pillow that hasn't been changed in a long time. That pillow then picks up bacteria, and then now we're trying to figure out why the child has pink eye. That's an example of how something like that could occur. Someone not being able to, let's say, bathe properly or wash dirt off of their skin ends up with an abscess. Their abscess then becomes infected because it goes untreated, and then it bursts and it's still exposed to an environment that is not clean, and then it gets an infection. And so there are these many different aspects that many aren't thinking about when it comes to the fact that not having adequate materials, and let's say not even a face cloth, could make a difference for someone, which is why I continue to emphasize that it's treated almost as if it's just a good deed. But people don't understand the importance that when you have churches, such as Pastor Brooks' church, that are giving away materials to families, these materials are absolutely needed because people are deciding, do I keep my lights on or do I actually afford items that are going to keep me healthy and keep me safe? So it's an important reality. I could go on and on and on about, this topic, but even something as simple as somebody having strep throat and then using the same toothbrush.
Yeah. Because when I've had viral infections or bacterial infections, I throw the toothbrushes out. And my grandmother, I told you about my grandmother who's passed on, Gertrude Brown. She grew up in absolute poverty. She was a migrant worker, in fact. She used to go throughout the Caribbean and South and Central America as a child. When she was from Florida, that's what she did in order to eat, chopping sugar cane and picking beans and all of that. And she was fanatical about being clean. You could not sleep on the same sheets. She only used white sheets. And as I look back, I can see that I think this was part of it, part of what she had seen, and then she went to work at the VA hospital. And so I just, and then my great-grandmother, who did not grow up in those circumstances, but she grew up poor, if you got sick, she would walk in the room, even in the winter, and she'd open up those windows and air out the room. And you'd have to get up, I don't care how sick you were, so she could change the bed. You had to bathe, change the bed, okay. Now finish sweating. After you finish sweating some more, you change the bed, you change your night clothes, all of that. And these are things that we don't think about. These are things we do not think about. So that's why we need you so desperately. Infection preventionist, brilliant health care specialist, infection preventionist, registered nurse, Dr. Shanina Knighton. Let's talk about term limits for the Supreme Court, everybody. July 15th through the 19th, we'll be having conversations like these at the Rainbow Push International Conference. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Oh, I mean, once I get on an issue, I'm like I'm me. I can't let it go. And when I just think of when I think of what people are going through, it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. Dr. Knighton, this is Pastor Darius Brooks, Grammy Award-winning Pastor Darius Brooks. Always so excited to have him with us. But I wanted him to speak to you today. Oh, I know you do. That's why I wanted you to be with her today. Dr. Knighton?
And just hearing.
Yes,
okay. That's Pastor Brooks. I want you all to connect because he's had an extraordinary life. And he came from one of the poorest neighborhoods in Chicago, and he has done quite well, quite well. But he went back with all of his success, and he's gone back to go help the people that he came from. and to show them new possibilities. I'm sorry, Dr. Knight.
Oh no, that's a blessing. But I was, and this is so unrelated, but Dr. Brooks Pastor Brooks got those infectious laughs, and so whenever we hear him laugh, it's so funny because he says it around and we just be cracking up. He got a laugh that makes you laugh.
Honey, he'll make you holler. Oh, bless his heart. You gotta love him. You gotta love him. And heaven knows I do. I'm like, you know what?
There's just options. You know, sometimes I'm going to tell you something. One of the things that has really blessed me being with your daddy and traveling around the country and being around billionaires and people who have absolutely nothing that's balanced. And I often say, if you think education is expensive, you should try ignorance, because Santita and Dr. Knighton, I've learned that some people are really not in the position to be good or have good, or that they really literally and figuratively are not in that place. And so some people, I've seen it. Santita, every time I think of going to Africa with your father, there is a place in Africa where they would not let nobody go. You had to go down this little hill, and Santita, down in that place, it was only, everybody used the same bucket of water, everybody used they were living in tents. It was so crazy that that the people who ran it, like a little area, they would not let nobody. They didn't even want Reverend Jackson to go down there. It was so bad. And I went down there, and I'm like, our people have no clue of what the world is really going through.
Wait.
And sometimes
let me interrupt you. We saw that in Tunica, Mississippi, just outside of Memphis, Sugar Ditch. We saw children in 1985 born without rectums because they had to drink, bathe, and relieve themselves in the same body of water.
Yeah, crazy.
It is real.
Yeah, crazy real. And even right now, as we speak, and I think some of us, which is why so information and truth is so needed. People are not teaching the truth; they're just thinking of positive. But sometimes, for us to win, we need some details. We need details. You said changing your sheet.
30 seconds.
The people that do not change their sheets every week.
Well,
and they'll get a cold.
We have Attorney Jones, Attorney Conley, Mr. McKee on.
They'll get a cold. Go ahead.
No, honey. I'm just about to move on to the next topic. But I want us to explore.
10 seconds.
Yeah, we should.
We've got to.
Stand by.
Having a good time on 4th of July, but I, in my mind, could not wrap. I couldn't wrap my mind around the fact that we had air quality issues and people doing fireworks.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Let's talk about this cesspool of corruption. That's what they're calling the Supreme Court. But I wanted Dr. Knight and Pastor Brooks very, very, very quickly, within 2 minutes, to wrap up the conversation that we were having on the other side of the break about hygiene poverty. Many of us are not aware of how people are struggling in the United States. Pastor Brooks, you talked about going to one of the countries in Africa where you saw extreme hygiene poverty, extreme poverty. And I said, whoa, hold on. I saw that here in the United States. That was what the war on poverty was about. Because when Robert Kennedy and LBJ, who came out of poverty, unlike the Kennedys, when the reason they waged war on poverty is because they got a chance to see it. It was so powerful to see Robert Kennedy reach out to poor white children who had the distended bellies. And then when you saw how they were living, they walked around their homes and go, oh my gosh, wait a minute, people are living like this in the United States, no running water. Tunica, Mississippi, where they now have a casino. And this is before they built the casino. In 1985, we went there. Reverend took Congressman Perrin Mitchell, one of the most powerful Black congressmen in the history of the U.S. Congress. He took him down there, one of the fathers of Black business. he said, we've got to do something about this. We had Mike Frazier, who worked for Senator Ted Kennedy at the time. We had a lot of people who Reverend just said, we've got to go and see this place. There was one ditch of water. White people live literally on the other side of the plane tracks in Tunica, Mississippi, which is just outside of Memphis. And what you saw was this ditch of water, this trail of water that ran through the black side of town. They had to drink, bathe, and relieve themselves out of that same body of water. And so we saw children born with profound birth defects, even children born without rectums, because of what they were exposed. This is the United States.
And Dr. Knighton gives really good information because Santita, I was sharing before here. You guys, the good stuff and the positive thinking and all this is good, but details can help us more often than not better to help ourselves do things, because ignorance is if you think education is expensive, you should try ignorance. She was just sharing about just the simple things, even with that big, crazy, amazing problem that we need to fix. Dr. Knighton was sharing with me about people just even now today with colds and you talking about wipes and changing your sheets almost every other day, because we get a cold, we get a virus, and go right back in the same bed and sleep. I was listening to her say this, and I'm like, wow. And we just do this every day and don't even think about the hygiene of just where we are right now. We got to cite that Michigan thing. We got to cite that African thing. Santita, where you and I and Dr. Knight is right now, her kids got to go to school. Yeah. And you got to go to the office, got to go to the church, and we better take care of ourselves too. This stuff is crazy out here.
Well, absolutely. Closing thought from you, Dr. Knighton. Gotta run on to this next segment.
Yes, I was going to say, and it's really just adding on to what Pastor Brooks just said, and it's really the first thing I think that needs to occur is to raise awareness, but it's also being able to connect the dots. And connect the dots is honestly what I got from him just speaking today, and that need for details. And while we are talking about hygiene poverty, Santita, I would be remiss just really quickly if I just watched how people ignored, the fact that we went through air quality issues that were out of our control within these past weeks. And then on the 4th of July, people further aggravated the issue by doing fireworks. And it's only places in America that we can recognize that there are literally people out here right now that are getting fungal lung infections, that are getting pneumonia, that are dealing with asthma exacerbations and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease exacerbations and allergy issues as a result of the air quality issues that is then taking a toll on their health. Mm-hmm. And this is, again,
Jackson, I sent you a text.
We're not talking about bacteria. We're not talking about viral or anything else. And so this is us, again, being able to connect the dots of how many hospitalizations have been experienced as a result of air quality issues, similarly to those that will be experienced and have been experienced as a result of not being able to have proper hygiene in the environment as well as for the personal body itself.
Well, you know what? We're going to beat this issue like a drum, because it's something that we are ignoring, and we don't know about it. So I mean, I'm not gonna down anybody, because the fact is a lot of people just don't know about it. But we're gonna continue to talk about this and raise this issue and do something about it. Get in touch with people, because this should not be any place in the world. I'm not just going to say in the United States of America. It shouldn't be anywhere. No child should go to school afraid to raise their hand. Dwight McKee and Aaron Connolly and Attorney Darrell Jones and Reverend Wilson when she joins us, because they don't wear deodorant, because they don't have deodorant, because they don't have any. They're afraid of the odor that they're going to emit. So I'm sending you much love. I got to move on to this topic, but thank you, Pastor Darius Hooks. Thank you, Dr. Shanina Knighton. We're going to continue. I'm going to call you, because we're going to do something about this. We're going to do something about this as we pass out food. We need to get some water to people. We need to get them some cleaning products for their bodies, So I'm sending you so much love today, but let's get right to it, everybody. Because I was just struck by this Alney family in Philadelphia. They're fighting hygiene poverty. I mean, come on, y'all. This is just not the way this is supposed to work. They're calling this a cesspool of corruption. Democrats, my friend Ro Khanna, and they're reintroducing a bill to impose term limits upon the Supreme Court. Now, this is after this historic term that they've had. I mean, over the past 2 weeks, I mean, we've just seen this pushback, this peeling back, this rollback, if you will, of the rights of LGBTQ people, of Black people. Ultimately, it's going to be of everybody. You just keep on watching it. So what we need to do is talk about term limits. I mean, because now we're beginning, ProPublica has done these exposés that have shown us that billionaires essentially have had their way with our justices. And they have paid them and they have ruled, and then these justices have been courted. They have ruled favorably in cases that favored the billionaires. I mean, this is where we are in America today. So let's talk with Attorney Aaron Connolly, Attorney Darrell Jones, and Dwight McKee, and eventually Reverend Jeanette Wilson about this. We'll be talking about these issues and so many more at the Rainbow Push Convention, July 15th through the 19th. Darrell Jones, what about term limits? I mean, it's like they don't have to check themselves on ethics. They can stay there for life. I mean, who has that? I want a job like that. Great benefit.
Where do I sign up, Santita? My goodness, and don't forget, you get to check yourself on the whole.
Reverend Wilson is on.
Whether or not there's a conflict of interest, you make all those determinations yourself on the Supreme Court. You don't have anyone to overlook anything that you're doing that has any authority to do anything other than the Senate, who at this point couldn't get the 60 votes to impeach any member of the Supreme Court. My goodness, what a great gig to have. But you're absolutely right.
And then it's just fighting for the rest of us, right?
Okay.
Oh, man.
So, our Supreme Court right now, interestingly, we say that all the polls show that they're at their lowest approval rating in the country's history. And I think at this point they're lower than Congress with regards to their approval rating. And so the question for them, often should become, how do we improve this image? How do we, put in American people's mind that we are a good entity and that we're doing what we're supposed to do? And I think that term limits would be one way of helping, because what would happen with the term limits is that, when a member of the judiciary of the Supreme Court, turn, whether it's 75, 80 years old, whatever it may be, that they would no longer be able to serve, and they could serve in some other capacity, but they wouldn't be one of the actively sitting members of the bench. And that would open it up for other members of the court to be appointed. And, that's one solution that's should be considered. And the other one, of course, that's being considered is expanding the court with a number of justices that sit to hear the cases. And that's happened a couple times in our country's history. But that's the other alternative that's there. But something needs to be done because, we know that, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And you're sitting there until you pass, you'll do whatever you want to do. So, I certainly am in favor of the term limits. And the question is, can we elect a Congress, a Senate that would be willing to implement it?
Well, I think we need to go past them and go to the corporations that hold them up. Look, we talked about this before. When you get to Congress, you already have a bill from your party. As a Democrat, it's close to $200,000. The party tells you must pay us that much money to be in good standing in the party. Otherwise, your appointments to committees are imperiled. I mean, this is horrible. It's the system the way it is, Darrell. It is corrupting. I mean, and good men and women go in, and then they go like, I mean, that's what happened to my brother Jesse Jr., Congressman Jackson, first one, when he went in. I mean, and the person who was doing the pushing, of course, the designated person was Rahm Emanuel. And you had to give up $200,000. This is like 30 years ago. He was like, are you serious? It's bad enough that I got to run every other year and I've got to raise money for my campaigns. But you mean to tell me I got to pay the party and then I can pay them some more money? Oh, no. We're blaming the wrong people because it's these corporations who are running things. The bankers. That's what Senator Durbin said during the banking crisis, Daryl. They are running.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Oh, absolutely, you're absolutely right. And you got to remember, when you're talking about a member of the House of Representatives, they're running for election every 2 years. So as soon as they're elected, they're back in election mode, and they're going to need money to be able to continue to pursue their run for election. And so, that's when, they start looking for people to support them, and you have other folks that will be coming out to say, I can raise money for you. I need you, to do this, to do that. Not necessarily that it's something nefarious, but you then begin the process of realizing that, you've got to raise money. And so there are positions you need to take. There are stances that you won't take because they're not in the interest of those that are supporting you financially. And those are not necessarily, and generally aren't, the people that have elected you. So, that becomes a large part of the process. So, you're absolutely right. There's all kinds of reform that needs to occur. But with the Supreme Court, they're not supposed to be raising money, right? But but we see all these lavish gifts and houses and vacation and all this other stuff. My goodness,
house. Come on. I mean, look, and then Justice Roberts' wife made $10 million. Look, placing lawyers. I mean, look, the rot here, and then you, Jeanette Wilson, you get a chance to stay for life. You can stay there forever.
That's right. And so none of us have a job that is guaranteed for life, where we cannot be challenged, we cannot be removed from office by even though we have engaged in unethical and in some instances what appears to be illegal conduct. How can you negotiate with people who appear before you, take bribes, so to speak, to shift decisions in a certain kind of way, and nothing happens? At first, I was confused about Alito and Clarence Thomas, no sanctions being imposed by the Chief Justice, until I discovered the Chief Justice Roberts' wife was cutting deals as well. And so I don't even think we can imagine any of us working a job, Daryl, getting appointed to a job. You're really not applying. You're selected. You're nominated. You don't apply to the Supreme Court like we apply to different jobs. You don't run for office so that the public even gets some view of you. You are nominated by a president. And if the president controls the majority in the Senate, you will be appointed.
Well, wait a minute.
Without any question.
And you were first vetted as a teenager when you went to the Ivy League. Let's be clear. Because that's the first vetting.
Yeah, well,
I think we need to call the system what it is. Because Amy Coney, there are very, very few who do not go into the Ivy League schools.
Well, the Ivy League schools that we built as slaves, that we staffed as servants, and yet we would not be admitted, could not get admitted to those Ivy League schools. And if some were admitted, many did not graduate and would not be recommended, because you have to have relationships with presidential powers of powerful people in the United States Senate. And most of us don't even know our state senators. We don't even know their names, let alone have relationships. So the legacy from the majority universities and colleges continues to all of these federal appointments, not just the Supreme Court, but to every major position in government. Because you wonder, where do these people come from? They are selected.
Yeah. All you have to do is just look at their CVs, and there's something to that.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm like, as if the only original and brilliant ideas come out of the Ivy League. Are you serious? No. But Aaron Connolly, what are your thoughts about this? I know you have a lot to say.
Well, good morning, Santita. Good morning to everyone on the panel and the Morning Stars. Yes, I mean, first of all, I think we should all be able to read you our law school for free, because the Supreme Court is dismantling everything we've learned about stare decisis, for example. I mean, it's it's absolutely wild, these opinions that have come out in this term, and it's hard to reconcile the moral and professional decay that is happening at our highest court. And we see these conflicts of interest that are so glaring. It's absolutely it's shocking. It's truly shocking to read these deep dives by ProPublica about Justice Alito, about Justice Thomas. And we want to also reference that before the article came out on Alito, as you've mentioned on the show, he had an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, which is also unheard of for a sitting justice to participate in defending himself, and before this scathing review of his unethical behavior comes out. So this is a corrupt system, and we have a spotlight on it now. I can't imagine that a Sandra Day O'Connor or a Justice Rehnquist, for example, would have even behaved in this manner, so blatantly just flaunting the privilege and influence they're getting from the billionaire class and not recusing themselves from these cases. Take the money, but recuse yourself, right? If you're going to be corrupt, at least have the decency and respect for the justice system, for the court, for your own legacy, to not dilute your own power, right? That's the piece that's extra shocking for me. We see congressional staffers, for example, will take a nominal gift for fear of violating their ethics and creating an investigation for their office. And then we see a Supreme Court justice who has no accountability. As you mentioned, this is the problem. And the conversation about term limits, about expanding the court, are so important right now because there is no faith. If there's no faith in these rulings, if there's no faith in the moral center of our justice system, that they are not personally enriching themselves. I mean, it's mind-blowing to see the connections that these folks have to the people that are benefiting from these opinions, right? And that is evident in every other aspect of our government, but the Supreme Court has always been held to a different standard, and the Chief Justice has been able throughout history to make sure that the court doesn't come under these type of influences. And the reticence of Justice Roberts to take accountability for his own conflicts, first of all.
Girl, he refuses to do it. His arrogance, his hubris is stunning. It's stunning. And no one is calling these people out on this. And part of the reason is you can't move them. You cannot move them. They are there for life. See right there, Aaron. Dwight McKee, they're there for life. And then when you look at the anger that is coursing throughout the American body politic, and you're like, oh, I don't know where this comes from. People are watching, Dwight. Nobody's crazy.
Well, we get the course we deserve, honestly. Is that in the corruption does not happen necessarily on the backside. The corruption starts on the front side, because these guys, these justices, are vetted by these foundations, like the Heritage Foundation. They're pre-vetted, and they look for a certain kind of personality, a certain kind of judge who they already have a sense of how they're going to vote on issues before they even nominate them. And then they go in front of Congress, the committees, and lie about their positions, or avoid telling the truth about their positions, so that there is no challenge to their positions. And they're usually in front of Congress guys who themselves are corrupted by the same system, who take all this money from these corporations. And so knowing that the people they're interviewing is lying, they give them latitude to lie, and to knowing that both of them are going to be taking money from the same sources. And so by the time you get to the Supreme Court, you are pretty much already embedded in a corrupt system. It's a lifetime appointment, and so there's no way to remove them. And they, as some of the panelists said, really have to make the decision to recuse themselves. And so when your check and balance is in-house, then you have the option to be corrupt with no recourse.
Well, do you think term limits would help?
So really, I think that term limits would just give more energy to the system. I think I'm for term limits. And I think that nobody should have a lifetime job. I think that, 70, 75 should be the time out for anybody there. But when the system is corrupt going in, the term limits only going to make but so much of a difference, because now you're going to go from somebody who's 80 and corrupt to somebody that's 40 and corrupt. Which is what we found in guys like Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas went on the Supreme Court. He was about 40, and he was already corrupt in his thoughts in many ways then, and it just carried over, So what you have is a Supreme Court with no supreme principles, and that's going to be until you kind of deal with that part of it. And the only way I think to deal with that part of it is for the average citizen to be more scrutinized. Yeah, more vigilant in the scrutinized going in through these the process, and who's getting chosen to be on the Supreme Court, and to make sure that they put people in who are doing the scrutinizing, who themselves are not corrupt.
Everybody, we'll be talking. We'll be talking about this issue and so many others at the Rainbow Push International Conference, July 15th through the 19th. You got to be there. Virtual is nice, but there's nothing like getting together and having these conversations in the seminars and in between them. It's going to be great. Can't wait to see you there. Let's talk. Not just about these Supreme Court term limits, but what about legacy admissions? Hey, you need to, if you went to the Ivy League, if your parents went there, you are in, like Flynn. What do you think about that? That's more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Okay, y'all, that was great. Thank you for moving that segment along. Boom. But you all keep talking because we're on Facebook now.
Well, I think one of the things we have to really think about, they don't have to have an unlimited term. Term means it's like with the president. The president can only run twice for office. And so the Supreme Court has an unlimited time limit on serving. And the idea was to keep them from being politicized, yet they are politicized. And they're controlled, and Santita, as you have said, by these corporate, this corporatocracy that we have now. They control the court, they control the Congress, and they control the Senate and the House, because everything is driven by the ability to get money, to market, to run. You look at these state legislators, same kind of thing. They need money to run, to win the office. And so then they yield to lobbyists who spend all of the time making sure that the legislation that they need is passed, is introduced and passed. And so our whole system is driven by this need for money. And there are no oversights on the Supreme Court. We have a little oversight in Congress. You look at the United States Senate. Our Senator Durbin chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee. Why hasn't he introduced any legislation suggesting that there need to be some oversight, independent oversight on the Supreme Court? You can't let individuals govern their ethical behavior. their own ethical behavior. And this is not the first time the court has operated like this. We have not had the media kind of exposure that ProPublica has done over the years, so we don't know what the rest of them have been doing. We just know about these three right now. I think it's important that we salute ProPublica for the investigation and the reveal. Now the question is, what are we going to challenge these senators and congresspersons to do?
And you know what? And examine these corporations too, because we do have a corporatocracy, and we need to start calling out these corporations. Jeanette and Aaron and Dwight and Daryl, because if you can't continue to deal with the fruit of the problem, you got to get to the root. They run this place. That is what Dick Durbin said when the economy collapsed, and that's what happened in 2008 when Goldman Sachs held us up with a 2.5-page document. They went to Nancy Pelosi and said, we will collapse the economy by Monday if you do not give us this $770 billion. We'd already given them more than $20 trillion.
Absolutely.
That's what the Dodd-Frank investigation showed. Somebody said, what is this? And then you will not give just a little relief to Americans who need student debt relief? Oh, come on. People ought to be outraged by that.
And students have to. I was talking to a group of young adults, all of whom have student loan debt. I said, I'm a baby boomer. Y'all laugh at us, but one of the things, we had an insult level. You couldn't just do stuff to us and we say, oh, this is the way it is. Well, it's not the way it should be.
No.
And so they bail out banks for for not loaning you money, for not allowing you to buy property. And you just sit back and say, well, this is America. No, it's not the America that we thought we were going to have, and it's not the America we deserve.
Attorney Fancher and Attorney O'Neill are on. I'm still trying to get a hold of Reverend Yuri.
Oh, no, you can wait for him. He's flying. Oh, no. I'm talking to my board operator. Thank you, Alex. Magnificent job that he does. He's always pushing.
He's wonderful.
Oh, yeah. But welcome to the show, Mark Fancher and Attorney Terry O'Neill. Attorney Mark Fancher, Attorney O'Neill.
Oh, we got the real lawyers now. No disrespect, Aaron.
But, honey, the fire throwers. There we go.
Now, you got the historian lawyer. He's going to come and lay it out. And then I don't know. There's just going to be fire now. I'm going to stop talking.
Well, I think it's great, but I'm really glad that all of you are here because all of you bring different layers to this issue. I guess it's just like a wonderful biscuit. Of course, I would make it about food. Yes, love it. These little flaky biscuits that have all these different layers, and you can put all the butter in it. It's just there. Oh, it's wonderful. But that's what each one of these wonderful people give. But we need to look at these corporations, and you've got to look at these legacy admissions. You've got to look at them. You've got to look at them. Because when you see the rate at which legacies are admitted to these Ivy League schools, and they're given the imprimatur, everybody, of being the brightest, and the most able. And that's the biggest lie. Anytime Jared Kushner's teachers at his school in New Jersey said he does not deserve to be there, y'all rescind the admission. Oh my gosh. And then President George Bush is speaking at Yale, getting an honorary doctorate, and he is laughing about it. He's like, I don't know how I got up in here. Are you serious? He knew, but it was like, you guys, the joke is between all of us, because I was having a lot of fun and I was not making the great grades. I wasn't doing any of that. And I'm like, wow, y'all, really? And then black kids are always having to defend themselves on those campuses when they get there. Well, I'm not an affirmative action baby. I'll tell folks, yes, I am. One of my parents' dearest friends said to me, because he was trying to get his daughter into Harvard, and she ended up, at another great school. I'm not going to call them out. And he said, well, you were an affirmative action baby. I said, absolutely. Which meant the first thing I was qualified to be there. And since I didn't call them and they called me, what do you have to say about that? I'm not defensive. Please, honey, I'm not 30 seconds. Okay? I didn't feel any ways bad about that. All this blood and sweat and we built these schools, and you mean to tell me I can't go? Oh, come on. Now I'm supposed to feel bad about, oh, get out. No. Nope. But Jeanette, we got to do something. And Aaron, we got to talk about
10
hygiene
seconds.
poverty. Stand by. We're coming up.
Stand by.
All right. Thank you, Alex.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It is Friday. Wow. July 7th, 2023. The Rainbow Push International Conference is the 15th through the 19th. We start next week, and you want to be there. We're going to have a reunion. We're going to have some conversations about how we all started here and where we're going. We're going to be talking about affirmative action. We'll be talking about hygiene poverty. We'll be talking about how you can build your business in this time. We'll be talking about STEM. We'll be talking about how we get our kids into college. We are getting ready to send our children on this Black college tour that we do every year through Push Excel. That's about to happen at the end of the month. Got a lot that you need to be involved in. All the great issues of the day will be raised and discussed at this conference, and you need to be there. Just get there. You will not be turned away. Go to rainbowpush.org, find out more about it, find out where it is, and also call 773-FREEDOM and get some information. Just show up. We want you to be there. We want you to be there, everybody. I am Santita Jackson. We have been talking about hygiene poverty today. Some children don't have deodorant, so they're afraid to raise their arms, raise their hands in class because they don't want to emit a foul odor. Wow. Think about that. Think about our children who are being born with birth defects because of hygiene poverty. Think about it. You don't think about people not having running water in the United States. You don't have to look at Sally Field in the middle of the night. Sally Struthers in the middle of the night, have her crying over children in the global South. No, that's in the United States, right here. And poverty should be defeated everywhere it is, any place in the world. So we'll be talking about that. And we talked about that today. But we also talked about the Supreme Court and term limits. Now we're talking about these legacy admissions to the Ivy League. Yes, many people have made much about Black children and Indigenous children, and no one's really talking about white women getting into college because of affirmative action, but that is what's happened because of all these opportunities. No one has talked about legacies at Harvard, at MIT, at Caltech. Now, mind you, Caltech and MIT ended their legacy program, but it's still a very real thing. If your parents contributed money, if they went to these schools, you are more likely to be admitted to these schools. In fact, there's a lawsuit that's been filed. I'm going to be talking about that. Legacy applicants at Harvard are 6 times likely to be accepted. 6 times likely to be accepted than the person who is the first person in their family to apply. What is going on? No one's talking about that. No one's talking about their qualifications. So let's get right to it, everybody, on the Santita Jackson Show. Let's get some of these headlines. The gunman who killed 23 people and wounded 22 others at a Texas Walmart in 2019 is expected to be sentenced today. The 24-year-old gunman nodded yes when asked by the son of a victim if he was sorry for the massacre, but he displayed no emotion. The FDA has granted full approval to the first Alzheimer's drug proven to slow the course of the memory-robbing disease. The drug has not been widely used because it costs $26,500 annually before insurance coverage. Got to continue to talk about that. A growing number of GOP presidential candidates are hitting the campaign trail months before the first nominating contest to boost their fundraising efforts. Former President Donald Trump, in the second quarter of 2023, in the wake of all of his legal troubles, has raised more than $35 million. It nearly doubles the figure that he raised in the first quarter of this year. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has raised $20 million during the second fundraising quarter, the same period. In Chicago, it's going to be a very pleasant day, mid-70s, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 79 degrees, almost 80, mostly cloudy. In Major League Baseball, the Orioles will be facing off against the Twins. The The Brewers won, but they were triumphant last night over the Cubs, 6-5. The Blue Jays 5-4 over the White Sox. In the WNBA, the Dream will be facing off against the Sky, and the Mercury will be facing off against the Lynx. In soccer, Chicago will be facing off against Nashville, and Minnesota will be facing off against Austin. What a beautiful time of year, everybody. You know, many people want to know if I can buy a car, if I can make any of these purchases in this economy that is so tenuous. We've got inflation. I mean, people are making more money, but they're able to buy less because the prices just continue to rise for everything. So you still can buy a house, though, believe it or not. And if you're a first-time home buyer, if you have not purchased a home within the past 3 years, that's what that means technically. If you've not purchased a home within the past 3 years, if you've not owned a home, within the past 3 years, that means you're a first-time home buyer. So you need to call Team Hochberg. They're your trusted local lender at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, and talk to them about the possibility of home ownership. You can do it. The home ownership numbers continue to fall. They were down to 26% of home buyers, first-time home buyers last year, down from 34% the year before, and numbers that were much higher in prior years. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have said we can turn these numbers around, and we're going to incentivize first-time home buyers, people who have not owned a home within the past 3 years, by substantially lowering our lending rates. Now, this program can go poof at any time, because if they raise the lending rates, the program goes too. So why don't you call Team Hochberg today at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or go to 56david.com and find out how they can help you, everybody. If you live in the Chicago area and the total income in your home is below $105,700, this program might work for you. So call them and get on the path for multi-generational wealth. Remember, homeowners beget other homeowners, and it just goes on down the line generationally. So call Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID. See if you qualify for these amazingly low mortgage rates, but also if you're having trouble holding on to your home, if you think you're looking at foreclosure, if whatever issue you have with your home, I want you to call them. Call them. And see if they can help you. I think that they can. Go to 56david.com if you want to look at the site, but call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, and speak to your trusted local lender, Team Hochberg. Everybody. There is a lawsuit now that is targeting Harvard legacy admissions. They say that this legacy admissions program, which has been in place since the founding of the school, targets and privileges wealthy, largely white alumni. Oh, I mean, the numbers are already there. The complaint notes that Harvard applicants, according to this report from Common Dreams, related to donors were nearly 7 times more likely to be accepted compared to other applicants during the 2014-2019 term. Legacy applicants were nearly 6 times likely to be accepted. So, in plain English, if someone you love, who loves you, gave money, you're going to get in. If your mom and daddy went there, you're going to get in. At least the chances are really, really, really great. 17% of the graduating Harvard students in 2019 had one or both parents who had attended the school, and 28% had parents or relatives who were alumni. It's an insider's game, everybody. Elizabeth Warren had it right. It is rigged. So let's talk about this, because now there is a lawsuit. There is a lawsuit in the wake of last week's Supreme Court decision ending race-based affirmative action in college admissions. They said, look, okay, we got something for you. We need to look at this program that favors white people who are wealthy. So what do you think about that? I want you to call me at 773-763-9278. I'm gonna have to run through some of my guests, because I'm gonna have to open up these phone lines. But I want to hear what everybody has to say about this. Dwight McKee, Attorney Aaron Conley, Attorney Darrell Jones, Reverend Jeanette Wilson, Esquire. She's a pastor, but she's also an attorney. And you've got Attorney Mark Fancher and Attorney Terry O'Neill. Let me start with you, Mark Fancher. What about this legacy admissions at Harvard and at these elite schools that really, they say, reveal the power and privilege at college, and they protect wealthy white alum, their children? Mark.
Well, I think that it really was one of the first things that popped into my mind after I heard about the Supreme Court's decision, because there is so much that's made of affirmative action and the impact that it has on admissions for students of color. But legacy admittees, and admissions for a whole host of other reasons that have very little to do sometimes with academic performance, not the least of which is those who are athletes, also have an impact on admissions and often result in applicants having a leg up, a special opportunity for admissions that others don't. And so, the rhetoric surrounding opposition to affirmative action has always been to the effect that people who are beneficiaries of affirmative action are getting a free pass, that they don't deserve to be admitted, that they are less competent or less intelligent than people who are otherwise admitted, when that is plainly a lie. There are so many people who are admitted because of legacy admissions and other things who probably in many cases are as dumb as rocks, but they've got the right connections. And one of the things that has frequently been suggested over the years, but which has never been seriously considered, is moving toward a straight meritocracy. In other words, you eliminate all of these special opportunities for admissions, all of them. And the only way that you get admitted into a university is on the basis of test scores and grades. And that's what's always been implied by opponents of affirmative action. But they need to be very careful about what they wish for, because I'm personally confident of a couple of things. If they went to a straight meritocracy, number one, because of their demonstrated performance, in terms of scores on standardized tests and grades, Asian students would score incredibly well, and many of them would be admitted to the exclusion of many white applicants. And I also believe, because I have such great faith and confidence in my own people, that if black students who already, contrary to the stereotype and the myth, black students already perform extremely well, and they try very hard. Those who are self-directed and who have backing and resources, they try very hard and they succeed. I believe that they too would not only redouble their efforts and would outscore and outperform white applicants, but I think that the scope, there would be more students of color, from black students, Latino students, and others, who, understanding that now there is an objective measure of performance that gives them a fair shot at admission, would perform extremely well too. That much of the energy which is directed now in areas where they think that there is an objective standard, whether it's sports or entertainment or other things, many kids who are directing their energy there, thinking that that gives them a fair shot at performing well, would now see a road or pathway to success through academics that they don't see now, because they feel that the game is rigged correctly. And I think that they too would gravitate toward that. And so I think that many of the white proponents of an end to affirmative action would be quite shocked and surprised by the ultimate outcome of a straight meritocracy, which is something that they would never get behind and they would never support. And I think that many universities too are reluctant to go that way, because they benefit in many ways from the donations that they get from alumni who get special privileges and benefits for their kids when they make large donations to universities. And they would be reluctant as well the universities might be reluctant as well to abandon this and to go straight for test scores and grades. And one final thing I'll suggest, just as a technical point that may not mean very much to anybody else, but I think the journalists are slightly incorrect about what's happening in terms of the challenges to the legacy. As I understand it, there's not been a lawsuit in court that's been filed
But what they have done is that they filed a complaint with the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, which enforces Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which specifically prohibits racial discrimination by institutions that receive federal funding. So just a slight technical thing that may not mean much to anybody. But
That's a big deal. But then let me follow that up with this question. Is there a pathway through the courts for legacy admissions to be scrutinized, to be examined?
If the Department of Education concludes that there is discrimination and they choose to litigate it, then yes. There is a bar right now in the law to private parties trying to enforce Title VI through the use of what's called disparate impact, where they are able to demonstrate statistical disparities in terms along racial lines. And so they're no longer able to do that as they once were, before the Supreme Court barred that avenue for challenging discrimination. But government agencies can still file those kinds of lawsuits. And if the Department of Education decides to do that, then they certainly could.
Attorney Terry O'Neill, what do you make of, look, when you see that Harvard applicants related to donors were nearly 7 times more likely to be accepted compared to other applicants. Legacy applicants nearly 6 times likelier. No matter, as Mark said, if they could be dumb as a box of rocks, it just doesn't matter.
Santita, that's exactly right. Look, despite years and years and years of supposed affirmative action at Harvard and other elite institutions, to be clear, the Black enrollment at those schools is pitifully low and has been. And I think part of the reason for that is that Harvard has, and all these elite institutions have, so many other preferences that they give to students, those preferences being weighted societally against African American students. So yes, now that the Supreme Court has demolished a race-based affirmative action, I think that the idea that it is really a meritorious system to get into an elite college is just simply false. That it actually, I think we're just going to go backwards in terms of allowing the best and the brightest of the country to go to these elite schools. I think Harvard, I predict that Harvard will defend its legacy program, that all of the elite institutions will defend their legacy programs. Why? Because that's where they get a lot of their money. Right. So yeah, it's I'm thrilled to see the challenge to the legacy programs. I worry that those legacy programs will be defended by these extremely powerful elite institutions and may be defended by the Supreme Court. In my personal opinion, John Roberts has had 2 goals as Chief Justice of the United States. First, he has wanted to stop Black people from voting. That box has been checked. Thank you, John Roberts. Now, the other thing he has always wanted is to stop Black students from getting into elite institutions. And again, with killing affirmative action, he has checked that box. So yeah, and if the Supreme Court were asked, do legacy admissions, are legacy admissions racist in some way? Well, clearly they have a racist impact, right? But I believe Roberts' Supreme Court will defend legacy admissions by saying, but it's not the intent. The intent is just for the elite institutions to get money from rich people who skew white. So if it's just the intent to get money and the impact is racist, oh well, says the Supreme Court, golly gee, we can't do anything about that. I think the whole game is rigged, and it's really something that higher education needs to figure out how to fix.
Well, Reverend Jeanette Wilson, you are the executive director of the Push for Excellence program. And of course, Judge Greg Mathis and Dr. Julianne Malveaux are the co-chairs of this wonderful program. How do you talk to our young people with I mean, just because, we had one young person who was desperate to get into one of these Ivy League institutions, as you know, it just happened. And it didn't happen. And he was devastated. And I'm like, does this boy know that this is not a meritocracy? I mean, does he not know this?
One of the things that I tell young people, those are not always really the best schools. They have developed a marketed reputation for greatness. And the fact of the matter is, some of your best people in the United States did not attend any of those Ivy League schools. And you look at the quality of a Thurgood Marshall or Houston as lawyers who, Thurgood made it to the Supreme Court, but many great legal scholars do not make it really because of color. And this legacy operates on many levels in America. And I think that it's something that we have to share with students, because you're competing every single day with people that are not qualified to sit next to you in these classes. They don't perform as well as you do. But you have to understand how the system really works. And my mother always taught me, as yours I'm sure did, we have to be 3 times smarter. And we have to work 5 times harder. And so, we have to give these children a real understanding of reality, and you have to fight every step of the way. You don't get anything.
Well, and also,
nothing's handed to you.
I will tell you this, merit scholars.
And I wouldn't seek to go to.
But merit scholars in my class, we started going to state schools and to the schools that gave us the best financial aid packages. That started happening in the 80s. Because you were like, please, I'm not going to go into this kind of debt. You said this 40 years ago.
But see, but these children are going into debt level after level, with no understanding that it's not making you smarter, it's making you
more indebted.
And not able to live comfortably.
Well, no,
so even if you get a great job, you're going to be paying back these student loans. This is crazy.
And quite frankly, it compromises you. You can't dissent. It jams you politically.
You cannot do it.
No, it
jams you at multiple levels.
There is. I think there's a program for this. I mean, University of Chicago is $100,000 a year. Who can afford to go there? Are you serious?
Right.
Oh, I can't wait to hear from everybody on the panel to talk about this. What about this lawsuit that is targeting the Harvard Legacies Commission? I think you're right, Attorney Terry O'Neill. I think that they are going to. Harvard's going to defend it. Power protects itself. Defend it. I got about 30 seconds, Terry O'Neill, before you go. Terry O'Neill?
Oh, sorry, Santita. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah, I think Harvard is going to defend it. All the elite schools will defend it, for money. But also, look at it. The affirmative action programs of these universities, I just have never been how do I put this? I've never really believed that these universities had a meritocracy in their sights. I think there's a lot of PR involved, and Jeanette is absolutely right. It's marketing. These elite institutions are elite in large part because of marketing, and once they have a certain amount of economic power, they leverage that to maintain their position as elite schools. Not that they're not great, not that they're not. I mean, that's true, but there's a lot of marketing involved with that.
All I can tell you.
It's all very cynical.
But you know what?
And
I'm glad Dr. King went to Morehouse and not Harvard. I think we'd still be on the back of the bus.
That's right. Exactly.
I'm just saying, but I love you, Terry O'Neill. Everybody call us at 773-763-9278. Let's talk about the legacy admissions. Did you know about those? Back with the Santita Jackman Show in just a minute. I'm sorry, Terry O'Neill, we're still on Facebook and YouTube, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do you want to say anything before you go?
She's off.
Oh, okay. I know she was running. But
Reverend Wilson is off too. Would you like me to call her back?
Okay, ask her if there's a remark that if she'd like to say something before she goes.
Okay.
But everybody else, hey, because I'm going to come back to everybody on the other side. What about this? What a hot mess. But you know what? If we had not had this Supreme Court decision, people would not be talking about legacies. about the legacy admissions at these elite universities. They wouldn't be talking about it. And please, Dwight, my experience with Harvard, not with Yale. Yale was, I wasn't even interviewed and I was accepted. That wasn't a problem. Harvard's just interesting. And they said, they told me I was the last person in my class they would consider for admission, Aaron, because I was 10th, but I was only at a public school. Okay. Even though it was the top school in the state. They were like, but, where your brother goes to school, that prep school, yeah, this school is Harvard's really, they're prepared to go to Harvard, not people like you. Oh, man.
Well, and Santita, you know that it starts at the prep schools too, right? When you see this privilege and aristocracy start, if you're a scholarship kid at these prep schools, you're not going to get the same awards as if your dad donates a library, or you're not going to start on the football team if somebody's child who is a big donor is making a fuss, and it starts then. It's not a meritocracy. So this argument from the right on this, that somehow the lack of affirmative action is a fair system, is a complete joke. Mm-hmm. And we've all been at elite universities or visited elite universities, and the legacy kids are the ones that often do not measure up.
Reverend Wilson is back on.
To grades or attendance or some of these things. So it's really been an aristocracy affirmative action that is allowed to exist on all levels in education.
Well, they insult me by calling it it's insulting for them to call it affirmative action, really. It is insulting.
It is because you were overqualified. They found you. Yeah. They found, we saw Joy Ann Reid say the same thing, that they came to her town in Colorado to find her, right? This is the best and the brightest. This is not.
You test well, okay? You test well, and that's great. I worked very hard. I get it, but you test well, and that's wonderful. But some of the most creative thinkers don't test well at all. And I know that my freedom fighters did not go to these schools as undergraduates. And there's something to be said about that. Okay.
1 minute.
Jeanette, I know before you go.
And it goes to Reverend Wilson's point. Absolutely. Yes, it's not always the best for those students.
Absolutely not. But before you go, Jeanette, always let me know, because I want you to make a closing statement about the convention. Okay? So let me let you do that very quickly, and then I'm going to let you go.
Well, I think
No, hold on. No, we're not up yet. We're coming up.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
30 seconds.
All right. But we have to stop that thinking. Okay, I can hear something in the background. So everybody get settled. Okay. All right. All right.
10 seconds. Stand by.
Flora, now you see. Okay.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am dreaming.
Hey everybody, let's talk about legacies. Now they are something that's legacy admissions to Harvard and to other elite schools are being scrutinized now that affirmative action has been gutted by the Supreme Court. I want you to call us at 773-763-9278. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Everybody, meet everybody over there, sending you so much love, having great conversations as we talk about this. This complaint lodged against Harvard shows that applicants related to donors are nearly 7 times more likely to be accepted at Harvard. Legacy applicants, 6 times more likely to be accepted. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. I mean, if you think that privilege does not exist in the United States, I mean, while Black and brown kids, when they're admitted to these universities, and indigenous kids, they have programs because your SAT scores might not be as high as those who went to the prep schools, who've been taking the SATs and the PSATs really since kindergarten almost. Yeah, so that's why they bust out those exams. True story. That's how it is. So they're made to feel like they're less than because they go to these programs that kind of get you up to speed, over the summers. You go there early, about 2 to 4 to 6 weeks, because you're somehow lacking. I mean, it's baked into the cake to make these folks feel inferior. It just needs to stop. And you're not talking about these kids who performed poorly at their elite schools or wherever they went to school, and their parents went to the school or donated to the schools, and that's it. So it's something to think about. We've got Dwight McKee, Attorney Darrell Jones, Attorney Aaron Connolly, and got to talk about this. Jeanette Wilson, we'll be talking about this and so many other issues, and of course, Attorney Mark Fancher. We'll be talking about this issue and so many others, but particularly with this. You head up the Push Excel program. Why is this significant today at our convention?
Thank you so much, Santita. Yes, I have the Push Excel program, and one of the programs that we have within Push Excel is College Bound. We prepare young people to apply to colleges and universities, trade schools all across the nation. One of the things that we help them do is to be admitted to colleges and universities based on their interests without having to graduate with student loan debt. And so as we open the convention on Saturday, we're inviting students all over America and those students who are within driving range of Rainbow Push in Chicago to come Saturday, because we're going to be discussing not only legacy admissions, affirmative action, but also the student loan debt. Students must rise up and fight against this debt crisis that they find themselves in, which won't allow them to marry, to purchase property, or to own cars, because the debt and in many instances the debt is so high they can be restricted from traveling abroad. So Saturday, July the 15th, we're inviting students and professors and parents. Join us on Saturday so that you and I can have a real discussion about our call to action to respond to the recent Supreme Court cases. And then on Monday, we're going to our scholarship recipients. But Monday, I want you to see the international crisis. James Gomez is bringing together persons from traveling all the way from the bottom of the continent of Africa all the way up to, so we're going from South Africa to Ghana to Nigeria and other countries on the continent. They're coming to our convention to share with us the state of affairs in Africa. We have several Haitians who will be marching this weekend, are joining us at Push because there's a crisis in Haiti. They've been mistreated in the Dominican Republic. So you don't want to miss that discussion. And then on Monday, all of that's happening on Monday. Tuesday, we have a business breakfast. You don't want to miss the business breakfast because we're going to talk about opportunities. The head of the Secretary of Commerce will be there. Also, the CEO of Bally's Casino, Bally's International, will be present and speaking. There's going to be a lot of opportunity, a lot of discussion about where we are in the state of business for African Americans and others. And then we have a Faith Leaders Luncheon. It's going to be power-packed because we have Reverend Dr. Freddie Haynes and the Mayor, Brandon Johnson. So, Pastor, go get your tickets now. And then that night, we're going to talk about the state of labor. This is a convention you don't want to miss. And then Wednesday, Women's Luncheon and Power Equity Roundtable. I mean, I just wish I could tell you everything, but what I can tell you to do is join us Saturday morning, July the 15th, and then close out with us on July the 19th. You don't want to miss anything in between, but you got to start and end.
All right. everybody, and call us at 773-FREEDOM, 773-FREEDOM, starting at 9 o'clock today, and go to rainbowpush.org. If you show up, you will not be turned away. Let's talk about these legacy admissions that privilege wealthy, largely white alumni and donors. Whoa, what is going on, everybody? Dwight McKee, what are your thoughts?
Well, I see it a little different. I don't buy into the notion that these institutions are elite. We can start there. I go sit 2 or 3 times a year. I go and sit in Cornell's classes, and he's taught at Harvard,
Cornell
Princeton, all of the major universities, Cornell West. 3 or 4 times a year, I go sit in his classes, and I listen to the students. And the students are not that elite. What's elite is the opportunities provided for the students when they leave those institutions, because the assumption is that because they went to Harvard and went to Yale, they're therefore brighter than anybody else. And the fact is, because the people in this country, the early slaveholders who graduated from the Harvards and the Yales, control the means of production in the country. And so they hire these kids based on some sense of familiarity. I'm not against legacy relationships, because most of the black colleges also operate on legacy. I mean, your mother and father went to A&T, and both your brothers went to A&T, and both of them became congressmen.
And my sister.
And your sister, she's a PhD. And so it really is, people at Oakwood College, the Seventh-day Adventist College, they're probably in their 5th generation in terms of legacy. Their identity comes from legacy, going to the school that their parents went through, that their grandparents went through, which is why our reunions are so spectacular, because they're so generational. So I don't think the issue so much is the legacy, so much as the advantages that coming out of these schools give you to, based on the presupposition that somehow they are more superior than the other schools. I think the emphasis should be placed on subsidized education. That, you know, the rich can go to whatever school they want to. The poor goes to whatever school they can. And so I think we should emphasize more closing the gap between what it costs you to go to school, and there should be subsidized education for those who have been discriminated against in any institution. If you can find billions of dollars for war, you can find billions of dollars for education if that's your emphasis, if that's your priority. And so if you take and add another $150,000 to somebody in McCary who wants to be a doctor, who can't afford to be a doctor but has the wherewithal to become a doctor, if he can pay for it, then over time that will close the gap, both educationally and professionally. Because once they come out as a doctor with not carrying that level of debt, then they can be competitive in the marketplace, and it can help us build a community. And what we'll see in the agents, and I think Mark is absolutely right about that, they're not only dealing with meritocracy, they also are very wealthy, those who are here, so they can afford to go to the University of Chicago because they have both the grades and the income to live overseas and to live in High Park and to pay both for this housing and for these classes. Because, you know, most of them come out of very well-to-do families. So that's where the gap is. I think that's where the emphasis should be. I think everything else is just reactionary to me.
Well, I mean, what do you think, Mark? Because, you know, the thing is going to, you know, it's interesting. When my father told me when he saw me throwing all these letters away, because, you know, I had a full scholarship to Howard and to Spelman. So I'd done what my mother asked me to do. Because she said, you know, in case the bottom drops out, which was her way of talking about assassinations, which we had to live with every day. She said, if the bottom drops out, I need you to be able to pay for college. So when you go to this school, I need you to finish at the top. I know you can do it. I need you to do it because I need you to pay for college. So I said, okay. So I had done that. So with all these other letters coming in, Mark, it was like, and Aaron and Daryl, it was like, hey, I've done what my mother asked me to do. College for me, it's a wrap. It's paid for. Boom. And I really wanted to go to Spelman. And my father said, hold up, wait a minute, because he saw the letters from Harvard and Caltech and Yale and all these other places on the bed. Because I looked at them, I was like, oh, wow, I'm honored that they reached out. Because I'm only 16 or 17. And he said, sadly, honey, you'll probably be at Howard or Spelman. He said, but sadly, many people will be more impressed with the fact that you were admitted to Harvard than they will be that you got they will be more impressed with that than the fact that you got your education from Howard. He said, it's just the way people think. It's sad, but it's true. So what about legacies? I mean, because when you go to the HBCUs, I mean, my father would take us down to A&T when I was growing up, when we were all growing up, boy, it was just such excitement. But when we go to Jackson State, when we go to the big game down in New Orleans, when you see Southern play, I mean, the pride that we have. I mean, the legacies are real, and there can be an upside to it. But it seems like something has happened here at Harvard, Mark, that makes your flesh crawl. Because we've created this oligarchical class that's sitting on top of us. They're making more money than ever before. I mean, we've traded out monarchs for oligarchs, and we have a mess. Mark Fancher.
Yeah, and it's not exclusive.
We have a caller, and Attorney O'Neill is off.
And I think we might want to reflect a little bit on Dr. King's thoughts toward the end of his life, where he had spent so much time and energy and effort trying to integrate into the mainstream of U.S. society, and he reflected and said, maybe we're integrating into a burning house. And the whole affirmative action thrust is part of that movement. It was intended to ensure that students of color have an opportunity to go to the major predominantly white universities and that they have access to them. But I know that personally, I attended large state universities for both undergraduate and for law school. And I know while I'm glad I did it because it helped to make me grow up really fast in terms of my understanding of institutions, institutional racism, personal racism, and all of those things, and just how important it was to struggle and to fight. The day-to-day existence was in many ways quite miserable. And I think that for so many students of color in predominantly white universities, their experience is not a good one. They feel isolated. They're certainly subject to attacks and discrimination by their fellow students and in the classroom by professors. They receive no institutional support of any significance. And it's just not a good experience, which is in many ways the basis for this renewed interest in HBCUs and a movement toward them. That started even before the Supreme Court weighed in on affirmative action. So I think we just generally, while as a matter of justice, we do need to fight the affirmative action battle, I think there's something more important and more significant that we need to think about in terms of really what's best for students of color. What is the best experience for them? What's going to prepare them best? And it may not be having a full-scale presence in these predominantly white universities. And if we're going to look to HBCUs to absorb them, then as a community, we need to really do some serious thinking about what's necessary in order to increase their capacity, because right now they're stretched. and they're bursting at the seams because of this new interest in those institutions.
Attorney Darrell Jones, your thoughts? I mean, Dwight makes a point. You know, when you go to HBCUs, you know, there is pride in being a legacy, but you know, the pride comes from another place because we were not allowed to learn. We were not allowed to go to school, so it doesn't come from a place of privilege. That pride comes from a place of struggle. Well, what do you think about this?
Yeah, you know, I've had the opportunity to attend both the HBCU and the PWI, both for undergraduate school. And, you know, what both Mark and Dwight lay out with regards to the HBCU experience, you know, I can tell you that, and as you know, Santita, there's nothing like it. There's nothing that compares to the camaraderie, that compares to the learning environment, that compares to, you know, just the familiarity of what goes on in an HBCU experience. That does not necessarily carry over to the PWIs, where you are more isolated, and oftentimes, even with the PWIs, in my experience in the University of Maryland, oftentimes you'll find that the community, the Black folks that are at Maryland will come together for survival purposes and certainly support one another. So there, you know, certainly differences, but similarities that exist in those experiences. But I think that one of the things that Mark touched on, which I think is key, is that, you know, for particularly the African American student, the real question becomes what's best for that individual student, because everyone learns differently and needs different experiences. And I think that's really what it comes down to. My concern with the legacy admissions piece is that it's going to start limiting, you know, those opportunities potentially. And, you know, my whole thing is that, you know, when we're talking about the legacy admissions and, you know, the way that they've been structured in Harvard and the other schools, you know, it doesn't just hit with the legacy pieces to it. There's a larger piece to it that also deals with those that the school professors, because of their you know, their family members, can have them admitted to the university. That the president or the dean is able to say, these are the people I want to have in. They don't necessarily have to match up with all of the other criteria, the merit pieces to it. That these are a special class of admittees, and generally they don't include African Americans. We're not included in that class because we don't have access to those opportunities. And so one of the big things, and when I was selecting schools, one of the big differences that I saw wasn't necessarily the opportunity to be admitted, but was the access to the opportunities from the people that they had within the institutions. Because you had the heads of many of the corporations that were in the Harvards, that were in the Ivy League towers. The access to those folks in order to be able to propel your career beyond the experience of undergraduate school, I think is what was key. And that becomes my biggest concern, is missing out on those opportunities. But again, I think it depends on the student, the individual student, how they learn, what environment they best learn in, and the experiences that they're looking for. That's what I think it really comes down to.
So, I mean, where do you see, Aaron, because as we're talking about race, gender bias is real for women of every color. I mean, and we're not talking about that. We're not talking about the fact that white women have been more advantaged by affirmative action than anybody else, and they surely needed it. We all have need of it. I mean, what's going to be the fallout here? I mean, and when you look at legacy admissions at Harvard, because no one's talking about that. We're only looking at the racial aspect of this. We're not looking at anything else.
And thank you for bringing that up, Santita. You know, I think white women have their head in the sand on a lot of issues, and I think this is a big one. I probably would not have been admitted to the undergraduate institutions in the law school I attended if I had done so in the 1970s, for example, when we weren't even allowed to have bank accounts or buy a house without a male relative signing for us. Women have not.
Wait. Stop. But wait.
Right.
I don't want you to go past that too fast, because that is so real. Well. I mean, I said this at a conference in Belgium in 2019, just before they shut everything down, and it was African women, and they stood up on their feet and they started cheering. I said, that's the United States 30, 40 years ago. I said, so we're all under the boot, and we're not much further beyond that. I saw this movie on Helen Reddy, and one of the big accomplishments of her life was getting a charge card with her name on it.
Right.
Oh my God.
And having economic, educational freedom. We were, and this is why it's so important for women to understand our own history and the struggles that we've had to overcome, and understand that this was a generation ago. I'm turning 40 years old this year, proud of it. But when my mother was in a difficult marriage, she did not have the option to leave. She did not have the confidence. It was maybe 10 years that women were even allowed to have these type of freedoms, right? So we have to understand where we are in history and understand that can be rolled back very, very quickly. And I think the immediate impact for women we'll see is in graduate admissions, in medical schools, in law schools, in places where women have been able to come in and almost be the majority. And we look at who's had a law review, who's at the top of the class. It's a lot of women. But when you start the process, that's where we may see some issues. And if we take women of color, we need more women of color in medicine, in law. The lack of representation is terrible. And when you are looking for a doctor or a lawyer, you need somebody that understands who you are, that understands what it's like to be a woman, what it's like to be a woman of color if you're leaving a difficult marriage or you're in a criminal case and the biases that exist. If we're talking about medicine, we need women to be there in those rooms when we're making critical medical decisions about our bodies, especially when the government is coming for us on so many levels. So women are about to get a big wake-up call, and I'm sad to see it. But also, white women have to take accountability that we have benefited, and then turn against the movement and the progress that we should be fighting for, right? But there's a mentality among many white women that I got mine, I don't care. Now I want to be part of this patriarchy. I want to get the other benefits of saying it's okay. And that's Clarence Thomas too. Amen.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I can't let this white woman take that hit. A lot of people, once they get theirs.
Fair enough.
Yeah. A lot of people, once they get theirs, they don't care about anyone else's. And that is your tragedy. That is, Clarence Thomas, you got in on affirmative action. Absolutely. But the sad thing is, because you feel you'd accept and you believe the lie that you're inferior. That's his tragedy. And that's the tragedy of so many people. So when they get into power,
it is, and
they hurt everybody else.
We need to know that history.
Absolutely, and you need to care about it. Stop feeling you're inferior. Know that you are somebody. God doesn't make junk. God is incapable of that. July 15th through the 19th, Rainbow Push International Conference. We'll be talking about issues just like this. Yes, you will see Aaron there. Yes, you will see Dwight McKee there. Yes, you will see Daryl Jones there. We got to get Mark Fancher in. It's going to be a great convention, because you'll make it so. I love you, everybody. I'll see you on Keep Up Alive on Sunday at 7 a.m. Go to iHeart and pick that up, everybody. And check out Radio Inc. magazine. Congratulations, Mark Pinsky and everybody here at WCPT. They wrote us up in the industry Bible. Hey, trying to save AM radio. That's what CPT is doing. And AM 950 radio. I love you, everybody. God bless you. Thank you, Alex, for a great show. See you on Sunday and then Monday. God bless you. Well, does anyone have anything else they'd like to contribute? I think, Dwight, thank you for bringing up the upside of the legacy experience, because we do need that. Hello, is anyone still there?
Well, I'm excited to see everybody at the convention. So I can't wait to see everyone in person.
Yeah, and not on Zoom, huh?
Not on Zoom.
Not on Zoom. Wow. But that's very, very, very important. I think that we need to. We're the ones who have to define the parameters of this discussion. We can't leave that to somebody else. and look at the upsides of legacy and the downsides of it. But the downside of it here is that you have turned, you've made this school. It is the platinum standard for schools, and that's just that in and of itself is crazy. In and of itself, it's crazy. But like I said, Dr. King, Harvard's mission was not to create a Dr. King, and they didn't. And so I'm really glad, and I think we need to understand that, Dwight and Mark and Daryl and Aaron. So I want to get some closing thoughts from everybody here before I run out of here. Mark Fancher, take us away.
Yes.
Anita's still on hold. Would you like me to put her through?
It's in some ways. I'm sorry.
No. I was speaking to. You didn't hear Alex. It's hold that thought. Let me let before you say anything. Let me let Anita come on. She's been holding for a minute. Anita, what's on your mind, sweetie? So glad that you're with us.
Okay, well, you know how I feel about the civil rights movement and your dad. With no foot, he carried on. Okay, look, this is what I can relate to prejudice, because all the schools I went to in Harvey and in Chicago when I was a little girl, the white teachers and the black teachers were great. They were so glad to have the opportunity to share knowledge. It was just great, and I'd like to see the whole America have that. But this is what I have. Years later, I was about 40-something, and I had this teacher when I was about 9. He was a science teacher. He always would take the people that was having trouble in the classroom, especially the boys, into his classroom, right? They'd be sitting there while he's teaching them. And then he would have a party at the end of the year for all of us to come and be with his wife and his daughter.
Oh.
So years later, a lady came up into a black guy. Lady came up into my line. One day I was at work, and she came and she was talking to me. Some kind of way we got to talking about it. And she said, Mr. She said his mother gave him to a white man, and the white man molested him when his mother gave it to him. So the older people also might have had his understanding of why you protect yours and don't send them out. And he was protecting those black boys. And he had a lot of them in that classroom while we were being taught. And I was in honors, the class of 7th grade. And then I was a grade ahead of myself. And I graduated from high school at 16. And I had one lady, her husband was a mortician, and she might have been one too, but she was a science teacher, and she was in Harvey too. You talking about great. That's what got me into science and math, these two teachers. And the white teachers, the women were very good. So were the white men. Like I said, they were all energetic. So I don't relate to the negative part because I saw only positive. So I would like to see those kids. And then when I was working at Oak Forest in a cooperative where they took behavior and physically disadvantaged children and put them in a class together, which means drug addicted. And this was from Hickory Hills. And there were black students there from the court, from the state. And they would fill up the population so they could have the thing, right? It was only 50 students in the class. And we had a police officer, if not 2, on duty every day just for 50 students. These were white students from rich areas, okay? Behavior disordered, okay? There were no black teachers there. I was the only one there, and I was a teacher's assistant, right? But I had math and science background, so they let me in. So a lot of discrimination is going on before, and those state wards need to be taken care of, and so-called white children need to be taught the same things black students need to be taught, and they're having the same problems. But when we got to college, I had turned Muslim. There was 2 Muslim girls from the Nation of Islam there, but they had converted. And they were very, very good at sticking. We were all in science and math together. There was only one other black boy and us 3 girls. And the calculus teacher, one day we took extra time to study so we didn't take the test in the morning. He switched the test because he thought we were cheating. We had no one to cheat with. We had tutors, and we went every day after class and, got tutored. So before they get there, there's also something that needs to be said about how do these students get there? They shouldn't be getting there and taking care of people because they don't want to be molested and all this kind of stuff. We got to deal with the whole issue. And I love you all for even taking, and the legacy, that's a no-no. Because you're not pulling in everybody when you just take a few people in, and then the knowledge doesn't change. Sometimes people
the knowledge becomes stagnant because it's the same group of people where you having fresh thoughts, fresh experiences coming in. So that's a harm to the whole country. At one point, it might have helped, but at this point, it's probably not a good idea not to have, fresh experiences from different people. And a long time ago, people had bigger families. So people took seriously being able to take care of themselves because they knew their parents weren't going to take care of them. And today people have just 2 children, and they don't seem to work as hard as the people who had bigger families, knowing that they couldn't come back home and get. So that might help the enrollment too.
Okay. Well, Mark, your closing thoughts. We've had a lot to just love you, Anita. We've covered a lot of ground today. Whew, I'm exhausted. And it's only 8. Mark, you still there, Mark Fancher? Well, Daryl Jones? Is anyone still there? Okay. Dwight McKee, are you there?
I stuck around.
Okay, Aaron. Okay, Aaron, your closing thoughts.
Well, I first of all, I hope everybody still is Sabine is at the convention. I'd love to meet all of the Morning Stars in person and put faces to these names and amazing comments. But about the conversation today, I think what really sticks with us is we have to take the power from a lot of these elite institutions and look to our own communities about what is best for us and cultivate the networks that can support these students, but also when they graduate, right? Because when, there's a big discussion right now in the medical field of what do you want your surgeon to look like, right? Is it the Harvard grad who's clean cut and has all the grades and everything? I don't look for that when I'm looking for someone. I want somebody that went to a Caribbean medical school, that has had adversity, that has had to go through these systems to be excellent still and come out on top, right? That has the grit and perseverance to be able to problem solve in complex situations, right? It's not always the best doctors, the best professionals that have these credentials. And we have to take the power out of that and realize, as you said, Santita, that God doesn't make mistakes. And you don't need to go to one elite institution that's the solution to your life. That, there's all kinds of different paths to success and prosperity and community. But we have to support and mentor these young people to make sure that they know that they have a community supporting them no matter where they go to school. And understand that so many of these systems are designed to just support the 1%, keeping power, keeping privilege, and keeping us out. It's a club, right? And once you get into the club, you have to support the membership. You forget who you are. So why do you want to join a club like that? I don't.
Well, you don't, I don't, but so many people do because they feel that they missed something because they were locked out.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. I just know that, it's not helpful. It doesn't help us to grow spiritually. Dwight McKee?
And they buy into the mythology that somehow these places are elite because they're white and well-to-do. Is the UCLA became an elite basketball program when Kareem went there, and Syracuse became an elite football program when Jim Brown went there. It's elite is relative, very relative, and when you assume that, like we used to do for the major leagues, is because they're white and fairly well-to-do, that they're somehow elite and different and better than and superior to anybody else. I think that's a misunderstanding of what we're looking at. So I never really was into affirmative action personally because all of the great minds that I grew up with were in black institutions and were already pre-affirmed. I mean, Jim Belver didn't go to Harvard. He was the brightest guy I'd ever seen, in my life.
Ever.
Your daddy had gone to A&T, and your mama tried to convince me to go there. And I see it as one of the great mistakes in my life that I went to a black institution. All of the great minds that I saw, Jack O'Dale's,
Why?
Because the most stable personalities the most resourceful personalities, and the best minds that I was around, all had come out of black institutions. The Dr. Andy Thomases, the Jack O'Dale's, they'd all come out of black institutions. And, they were tremendously resourceful. Dr. King was a class above it, almost anybody else in the world. And he had come out of black institutions. All of the black talent came out of the black churches. I mean, I could look at my own church. Sam Cooke was a member of my church. The Staple Singers were a member of my church.
Yeah, our church.
Mahalia Jackson came by there once a week. Our church. Mahalia came by there once a month. It was the greatest talent. To me, was right up the street. My baseball coach growing up was Ernie Banks. He was my mentor. And he and Billy Williams taught us how to play baseball. And he was Mr. Cub and the MVP. I mean, all of the great talents and minds, at least that I was exposed to, almost 90% of them came out of the black community. So I was never that infatuated with white colleges and the elite colleges and the Ivy League colleges. In some ways, I saw them as inferior because they didn't have the Ernie Bankses and the Satchel Pages and the Willie Mazes. And in many ways, I saw them as inferior institutions because they didn't have the Dr. Kings and the Jim Bellows. But I guess it's a matter of perspective. Now, I did see them as advantage because their daddies and granddaddies controlled the means of production and had all of the money because, they were the first ones to really be in on the looting of the country. And they was able to transfer that into, into academia. They were slaveholders, and many of them, and had gone to the Harvards and to the Yales and was able to transfer that wealth generationally. And it gave their great-grandchildren an advantage. But there was an economic advantage. There wasn't, a inherent educational advantage or intellectual advantage. It was an advantage that you would have been able to transfer loot provides for you, which was no different than the Queen to me. The Queen, Prince Charles has the advantage of the generation of loot. But when you look him in the eyes, again, he reminds you of Apple Newman, but we worry. I mean, he is not a great intellectual by any stretch of the imagination. But he does have an advantage. And I don't care what institution he went to. I think he went to Cambridge, the elite British institutions. But when you talk with him, he's a pretty mediocre guy. He's still a king, but he's still a pretty mediocre guy to me.
Well, I think he has spoken. Some of the most brilliant people in the world did not go to those other schools. And I'm not downing anybody's school. I mean, hey, go where you go. But let's be clear. Genius is everywhere. Everywhere. It's everywhere. Think about that. And let's look at these institutions. First of all, let's look, I think Dwight and Aaron, we've got to look within ourselves and look at what our own needs are. My father explained it to me this way. He said, you know what? You've always been very studious. You've been in the back, in that room, studying, reading. He said, look, when you go to college, you're going to find that the same books, they have the same books at Harvard and Howard and Harvard. No difference. And you know what? When I was an undergrad, I would go over to George Washington and Georgetown and pick up my books as the line was shorter. Okay. He said, now, but what you're going to get at the black school is a social/academic experience. At the white school, an academic/social. Academically, you're going to get the same thing. But socially, you're going to have a very, very different experience. He said, now, what I really think you need is a social/academic, because I don't want you just to sit in your room and just do the work. That might work for somebody else, but for you, I don't want that. And I'm so grateful for that. You know, I'm glad that my parents thought enough of themselves and thought enough of Black people and of people who've been marginalized to say, hey, wait. That's what I had to tell the Harvard interviewer. Well, if you don't go here, where will you go? I said, well, this is not my first choice. Please, my parents did well, and they went to A&T. Hello. You know, I mean, what is this? But that's how I saw it. And I, like you, Dwight, Aaron, the most brilliant people I knew after Dr. Andrew Thomas came out of the University of Chicago with the highest honors, they would not admit him into their medical school. So he went to Howard's Medical School. That's that story. And then he came out and created Project 75, which was the program that got more Black kids to and through undergraduate and to and through medical school than at any other time in the history of the United States. That was his program.
And it's still around.
Absolutely.
And it's still around.
And they're reviving it.
But I was able to see next door to your house, Rebs Lewis and Mr. Him and Maurice White rehearse. The emotions came out of my youth division. Wanda to this day is one of my best friends. And they were the top R&B group of the girls group of the 70s and some of the 80s. I mean, the kind of excellence I was exposed to growing up, you didn't even have to go around the corner to be to experience. You could just go block to block. You know, Walt Frazier lived on the other side of your parents' house. Live behind you all.
Gail Sayers lived up the street.
The Times family, huh?
Gail Sayers lived up the street. 2 blocks
Gail
up.
Sayers lived up the street. The Times family lived across the street. I mean, these were the best and the brightest in the world. And so I was just never that fascinated by these other institutions because I saw my neighbors compete with the best white people in the world and prevail. Ernie Banks was the home run leader in the major leagues. She was MVP of the major leagues. You know, not the Negro leagues, of the major leagues. And again, he was our baseball coach and basketball coach. I mean, we were able to see a level of excellence that was almost unparalleled. And so again, I just kind of reject the notion that these institutions are so elite. They're advantaged, but they're just not that elite.
You get no argument from me. You know, I think our whole sense of that which is good and great has to change, and that's what this is part of. You know, I mean, the smartest, the best, the brightest. No, people who tested well, because that's what Merit Scholars did. We tested well. Many of us started going to where the best financial aid packages were in the 80s. It was like, I am not going to get up. I'm not going to come out of Harvard and Yale with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, because essentially that's what you would have done then. I'm not coming out with $200,000, $300,000 worth of debt. I'm not doing that. Not when this school will pay me to come there. And my mother told me, no, aside from not for nothing. Now my father, for his portion, said, if this is where you want to go, I will make a way. I'm not going to stand in your way. My mother said, no, you're not going to insult. After all the work you've done, I'm not going to let you insult Howard, who have opened their arms to you. I'm not going to let you do that. No, not going to do that. And then after the insult, after this horrifying experience that we've had with these folks, no, we're not going to do that. Not when they tell me, Aaron, that, well, Mrs. Jackson, you ought to be proud of your daughter. She got in despite your husband. And then they wanted my father to write a check. Oh, wait a minute, I have an insult level. Girl, I have an insult level. No, because that means, my mother said, wait, she said, whoa. You all called her. We didn't call you. You've called her. You've come to my house. You've gone to her school. You've tried to pull her out of class, and I've told her not to move an inch out of a classroom for anybody. You all have done all. You've done all this, and then you say that she said you dare call me and say this to me? Oh no! I gotta go. I gotta flood. I love you.
Love you.
Okay. Bye bye. I love y'all. I'm out of here, and I am off the air. Mr. Glock.